Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back once again to Fat Cat Collections. Got another car stereo review for you guys, and this is another one by Binize. So I've been working with Binize on a couple different collaborations now, and they were nice enough to reach out again and offer a car stereo for a review. Now this is very similar to a stereo I've already reviewed. If you haven't checked that out and checked out my other car audio reviews, definitely check them out. I have 4 awesome systems in 4 of my vehicles, and I tell you, I am a car audio and audio buff, like just across the board. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, I gotta have my music, and I absolutely love having a banging car stereo system. Now, we live in an interesting time. Back in the day, I used to sell car audio and electronics, and I'll tell you, things were pretty expensive. You paid a lot of money for amplifiers, and I kind of compare car audio to like watches, where you still have the people out there who think that affordable brands, off brands, are garbage. I hear it all the time with my Sony Explode system in one of my vehicles. I got 610s running off a Smart 3K amplifier. The thing just bangs. Ported, tuned. Remember, it's all about the enclosure. Of course, naturally, subwoofers, there are better subs, and there are entry-level subs, and there are competition subs. And there is a difference there. But for the average user, just to make the statement that, oh, this is crap because, doesn't really, without really any reasoning behind it, doesn't really hold water. And this is kind of the problem we have really with anything on earth. There's always going to be somebody, there's always going to be a snob, in some cases car audio snobs, who really think that they know what they're talking about when it comes to car audio, and they just don't. A lot of times, when it comes to really high-end stuff, it really comes, especially when it comes to amplifiers and, of course, power outputs, right? And subs and bass. A lot of that is determined based on what you're going to be doing with the system. And so if you're going to be doing competitions, DB drag races, all that stuff really comes into play. Car acoustic, it becomes extremely critical in how you design your system. But most of us just want it to sound good and, rattle the windows a little bit, right? Depending on what you want, right? So Binize is one of these companies that's kind of like an Amazon brand. I have their products in several of my vehicles, and I've been extremely impressed. One thing to be noted, when you're buying these Android-based car audio systems, I've reviewed in the past an audio control LC1i, I think it was called, and I use that in my vehicles because it helps to kind of ensure that you're going to be getting clean signal from the deck. The problem with a lot of these aftermarket decks, and something I wish a company like Binize should really look into, is trying to give the consumer specifications on total harmonic distortion and some of those numbers we look for when we're looking for a reliable, good sounding car stereo. I've had car stereos that really sound terrible, and unfortunately, that's just something you're going to have to deal with when you're buying stuff like this. However, I can wholeheartedly tell you I am very impressed with the output of the Binize car stereos. Now, I have one of these in my Dodge Ram build. This one's going to be going in my Honda to replace a stereo that I got off Amazon by a different competitor, and it just sounds awful. Like, it distorts, it just doesn't, I've never been happy with it, right? And so, again, you just got to be careful what you buy. I always recommend, again, no matter which brand you're buying, whatever you decide to give a chance to, is you buy an audio control LC1. That's basically a high level to low level converter, and also a standard, I believe that one, just don't quote me on it, I kind of forget. I have the LC2i and the LC1. One was a high level to low level converter that allows you to turn the deck up and find when, by turning up the gains, find when the deck is starting to distort, whether that's through RCAs or high level to low level inputs. Now this does have a set of pre-outs, and I'm just going to show you what the deck looks like. This is their 10-inch screen. Very nice. I have this exact deck in my Dodge. I find it very responsive. I have not tested this one, but it's a Binize. It's going to be responsive, and it works really well. I've been very happy with this. To be honest with you, of all the decks that I've had that are these Android-based no-name brand or off-brands, and when I say off-brand, I mean they're not Sony, they're not JVC, they're not Alpine, they're not a lot of Nakamichi, a lot of those brands we're familiar with in the car audio industry. And again, it does suck you don't have the ratings on these for the total harmonic distortion and some of those, the voltage ratings on the outputs. To really test these things, to properly install these, what you'd want to do is, whether you're using high levels out to your speakers or you're using a high level to low level converter, or the RCAs in this, you want to put an oscilloscope on it and test test it and find out where it starts to distort. Now, I'm guilty of this too. I put an oscilloscope on one before, and to be honest with you, what kind of is difficult when you have multiple vehicles is 35 might be the clean max on this, and then in another vehicle it might be 32. And so you just got to kind of tune it the best you can and try to listen for the harmonic distortion. Listen for distortion if you're not going to use an oscilloscope, right? Now, I will say that on mine, the other one, I do turn up to 35, and I do think it's a kind of a good spot to kind of tune your system around. Figure the max output 35 on this if using RCAs, or using the high level to low level converter by audio control. The audio control is nice because as you turn the deck up, you will start to turn the gain up on the audio control, and it has a status light that'll tell you when it's detecting distortion. And you know at that point you back down a little, and you kind of have an idea of where your max volume is going to be for this particular deck, right? You do this kind of work down the chain. You do it with the deck, then you kind of voltage match your amplifiers to the amp. Most people don't do it that way, and I'm guilty of doing that too sometimes. I basically will find out where the deck distorts at, and then I will basically turn my gains up to where I feel like it sounds good and it's not distorting, right? So that's kind of how I do it, right? Doesn't mean it's the proper way of doing it, but I can assure you that this is a fantastic deck for the money, okay? So what do you get with this? So you do get, I'm just gonna put this down for a second. I do have one complaint about this. I hope they change. So you get the harness. They do give you a backup camera as well. My other one did not come with that. At least I don't think it did. So I will take advantage of that. You get, you know, all your cords, your backup camera. You get your instruction manual, which, you know, is not really something you really have to worry about. And then all your interface. You have the GPS antenna. You have your RCAs. And unfortunately, I think that this deck, oh, interesting. Oh, real interesting. Let me just see something here. Let me open this up. They might have changed something. So one thing with these decks, they generally just have one set of RCA outs, which is kind of annoying because most people who are doing a stereo system in their car are going to have a subwoofer. They are going to have a front amp and a rear amp, right? Or a 4-channel amp. And this, let's see what this actually has on it. So this has, whoops, I'm dropping stuff here. This actually has, this is kind of a new addition. My other one doesn't have this. This has a set of, you have auxiliary in, which a lot of this, again, you don't really going to use. Video out, audio out. So you have one set of RCAs on this, and then you have a subwoofer out. So kind of dumb, they just put it as a mono, because I don't know why companies do this. There's no subwoofer amps that I'm aware of. Let me think about that for a second. Let me just take my foot out of my mouth for a second. It's been a while since I looked at mine. Most amps that I've seen have a left and right. You have a left and right, and it may be a mono amplifier, but that happens internally in the amp. I've never seen an amp with just a single subwoofer out. This is something done on home audio where you have your subwoofer connection just as one RCA. So Binize needs to change this and make it just standard RCAs, left and right for your subwoofer. But it's almost like they don't understand how most audio works, right? But anyway, a way around that is you just put a Y connector on here, and you'll just split it into 2 RCAs. You can use that, okay? So that's kind of cool that they do that. I hope that this has a individual subwoofer control. And then, you know, the rest of it, you have your camera, RCA, and again, I mentioned the antenna. I'm just going to put this back for a second so I don't drop anything else out of here. So that's really about it. You also get a couple, this is pretty standard, mounting brackets. These are pretty standard. And that's about it. Now let me talk about the things that bug me. This is an Android deck, right? And as far as the operating system on this, it doesn't say which Android, but this has 1 gig of RAM and 16 gigs of ROM. So realistically, you're probably not going to put tons of apps on this, but you have room to do so. It does have mirror link for iPhone and Android, but it says not Samsung for some reason. Built-in Wi-Fi receiver, so if you want to connect this to your phone and have Wi-Fi in this, you can. And I'm going to put the link in the description where you can just read more about it directly from the Binize site. A lot of the features on this are going to be pretty standard across the board, especially with an Android deck. You're going to be able to put the Android apps you want, YouTube Music, Google Music, all that stuff. You have FM radio, you have GPS, and the Wi-Fi connection. All right, so let's talk about the important stuff, right? This is something that kind of always bugs me with these car stereos. I don't want this to be like that I'm bashing this deck in any way. I'm very happy with Binize, and I like the Android decks because they look cool and you get a big screen. A couple things that bother me with decks like this is that the music, and Binize, take note of this, because this is something you need to change on your operating system to be even more competitive. thing that really bugs me is that with these operating systems, your standard music app that comes on the deck is very scaled down, and generally you don't have all the artist or the file information when you use a USB drive to plug into this for your music. Now, I do a lot of Bluetooth streaming, and even with Bluetooth, you don't get a nice big display. It would be really nice if that Bluetooth link up showed a lot more text like you'd see on your phone if you're using YouTube Music. None of them seem to do that. No, I've tested many different brands. The other thing that really bugs me about these is that this is very difficult to install, and the reason for this is because the brackets they give you are actually screwed on. There's no cage on this. So if you're going to install this, a lot of times you have to be very creative in how you do this, because standard decks that have an actual like, we'll call it the brain, and then a faceplate, the faceplate will pop off. So then you can install in the cage, let's say a double DIN deck, you would install the cage in your car, then of course you would slide the deck into that, and there's little releases. The idea in that is that you can actually have you can actually attach this to your car. Something like this, if we look at where this is going in my Honda, I have to pull the entire dash panel off, attach this somehow from the back, and then pop that back on. And not all cars are you able to do what I'm going to attempt to do with this. So that's kind of a problem, right? That's something they really should devise a way to have a cage you install, and then you would install the brackets, some sort of special bracket on this, and then you would slide it and click it in once you have it installed. That's so you can access the wires without taking the whole dash apart, right? So that's a real problem with a lot of these Android decks. So just know, if you are a creative installer like myself, you can find a way around that. It just depends on your car. To be honest with you, the one I have in my Honda now, I actually put some almost double stick tape, and I kind of wedge it into the dash. It stays, it's not going anywhere, but it's not technically installed the way it's supposed to be installed, but it works, right? The other thing that really bugs me about this particular deck, and that previous comment was about Android decks in general, one thing I wish Binize would improve upon on here is the volume buttons. So these are not backlit, at least on the one that I have in the other vehicle, and I do believe these are not backlit. So when you're trying to adjust the volume quickly, you can't see this in the dark. And so that's really a real poor design, in my opinion, that they didn't backlight these function buttons like home, return, and volume up and down. Now, if I am wrong on this new version, they did do that, I will put a note in description correcting myself. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think they have. So that's a real pain. I would like to see the addition of 2 knobs on this. A couple things. I'd like to see the addition of dual RCA outputs that are clean, that are tested to 2 or 4 volts. And I'd like to see 2 volume knobs on this, where you have a subwoofer control and you have a volume knob. You can put them on the corners here. Even if they were actually hard buttons, you could do something like that. But it's really nice to be able to adjust the subwoofer independently. We've all been driving, if you're an audio guy, we've all been driving and you're like, oh, I want to turn down the bass of this song. Unless you have a bass knob, it's kind of a pain in the ass. You're not going to go into the menu, and I mean, you're trying to drive the vehicle. People are distracted as it is. So you probably want to do what I do, is I add a subwoofer knob specifically on that amp, an attenuator somewhere strategically installed in the car that I can, and not a bass knob. A bass knob is different than an attenuator. Attenuator changes the volume, attenuates the signal, whereas a bass knob that comes with your amp adjusts the gain. You can use it like a volume knob, that's not really what it's for. So just kind of keep that in mind. So what else on this? The other thing that what was another thing I don't like on these? I wish it had a USB port rather than being part of the harness, so you kind of have to have that dangling out the back, and depending on your vehicle, it might be a little bit of a pain to install. I usually tuck mine under the dash, because once you have your music on there, you're usually good to go, but I would like to see a little USB port on the side. And what else? Those are really my big gripes on these. Other than that, they're pretty snappy, they work pretty well, and they sound pretty decent. Again, that is subjective. Everybody's going to have things that they're looking for, they like or dislike in an audio system or a stereo. But the things I brought up, I just don't see any Android company making these changes. And it's really kind of annoying. The music player app, whether it's Bluetooth or onboard USB, you have this big, beautiful screen, with like a little bit of text, and it's just really annoying because what's the point of having the big screen? Most people are not watching movies in their car. I've also found a lot of these decks, when you go using like YouTube music, they're not super snappy. It kind of bogs them down. So my recommendation with a lot of these, and even quad core models, so I think if you are concerned with doing a lot of that, using Wi-Fi and using the streaming music from Google Music or Amazon Music with the graphics and the artist and all that stuff, I would recommend maybe getting something that has a better processing power than this particular one. They have other ones, so this is just the one they sent me. Price point on this is pretty amazing. It's like 80 bucks. Again, I'll put the link to Amazon and their store in description. But that's really about the main stuff. You have steering wheel control, but it's very difficult to set up. I have no idea how to do that. You really have to get an installer involved. I mean, a professional installer could tap into the circuits of the car, but it does have that if you want to do that. It does have the backup camera input, and it does have mirror link, and looks like it has wireless CarPlay cars. Not really 100% sure on that, but like I said, overall, it's a great deck, and I think if you are in the market for a really nice looking screen that sounds, again, I think pretty decent. I'm pretty happy with the way it sounds compared to some of the other ones I've reviewed. These are like the only ones. Like, honestly, if another company reached out, like the one that I bought, and was like, hey, I want to send you a stereo, I'd probably be like, I don't think I'm interested unless you guys have made some serious changes. But these sound good. They look good, and I'll tell you, this looks fantastic in the Dodge. The only thing with the Honda, this is where this is going to go. It definitely, because the dash is smaller, this is going to be vehicle specific. It may fit perfectly. This would look perfect in the Solara. This would look perfect in the Jag if I didn't have the fiber optic system in that. But it is a really nice value for the money, and it just goes to show you that you can get amazing products nowadays for just a fantastic price, and really get a nice sounding system for cheap. Don't let these high-end audio stores tell you got to go spend $800 for a Fosgate amp. I have $800 Fosgate Punch 800 amp. It's a great amp, don't get me wrong. But, when you compare the sound quality of all the amps that I have, there's really not a lot of difference. They all sound good, and keep in mind, this is not like, your car is not a recording studio. Most people, especially for aftermarket stuff like this, usually they're going into older cars, right? And older cars generally, especially now like my Honda, my Solara, they ride good, they're lowered, but you get tire road noise, they're lowered. And most time you get the windows down, so there's a lot of noise in a car, and I don't think you should kind of treat a car the same way you would treat like a recording studio. So you just want to sound good, blow the doors off a little bit with some bass, or rattle your ears, if that's what you're into. I sure as fuck am. But just kind of a couple things to kind of keep in mind. So that's about it. I want to thank Binize for their generosity in sending this out to Fat Cat Collections. Once I install this, I'll throw up some pictures on Instagram, and I'll probably change the thumbnail image on this video to show you what it looks like in a 2000 Honda Accord. I think it's gonna look pretty sick, and I'm gonna be pretty happy with it. It'd be nice to get rid of. I've been waiting for a company to reach out again to get rid of that other deck I have, because I absolutely hate it. So again, Binize, I hope you take my recommendations and create a new model for the next coming years. I think if you add the things I told you, you'll have an out of the park, real knockout deck. So anyway, if I can help in any way, let me know, Binize. If I can help you guys out in any way, answer any questions, let me know. Do check out my Dodge Ram build video on the stereo. Do check out my Solara and my Honda, give you some ideas. So thanks for watching. Have a good day and take care.